Today, we're going to be breaking down some wide receiver press releases step by step. So we're going to be talking about when to use specific press releases and then the exact technique that go into different press releases off the line. So when deciding what press release to use, you guys, you want to look at two specific things on the DB. Number one, his leverage. So is he shaded to the outside? Is he right in front of me? Is he inside? And then we want to look at how close or how far is he? Is he right up on the line of scrimmage like this example? Is he 2 yards away? Is he 5 yards away? All of that factors into my plan. Now, as a wide receiver, can a DB change up what he's doing? Absolutely. And I want to be prepared to react. But when you're walking up to line, you need to have an initial plan. You need to have a plan A and then like a plan B, for example. So this first release is going to be something called a lateral wide step. So a lateral wide step is exactly how it sounds. You're stepping with your back foot in your stance wide to try to attack this DB's leverage to move him to the outside. So I love this release when a DB is an outside shade press right up on the line. So I'm going to play it full speed and then we'll break it down step by step, the technique and some other IQ points of when to use this release. So let's break this down. So first step of this release, you need to have some speed, right? So a lot of wide receivers, the mistake that they will make on this like lateral wide step is they will go from a flat-footed position and just try to simply jab to the outside. Like guys, this DB's outside shade press for a reason. He's outside shade press to prevent us from going to the outside. So we need to make him think that I'm doing some type of speed release where I'm just trying to get around and maybe it's like an MOR. I'm hoping a few of you know what that is. An MOR is a mandatory outside release. I want to make it look like that. So I need some speed to the outside and I need to be able to actually step wide to threaten his leverage. So the first step of this release, you guys, is with this front foot and it's something I call a prep step. So a prep step is not a false step, although it looks like a false step. If it was like zone coverage and this wide receiver had to run like a post route and the DB was like 8 yards away, like yeah, that would be a false step because you need to just get into the route at that point. But this step is a part of the release. You essentially just pick your foot up and step slightly to the inside. It's not a full jab step, but that is just what that step does is it creates a little bit of explosion, especially if you're fast with the step, and it allows us to push off of this step so I could gain a little bit more ground with the outside jab step. Guys, if you just come from your stance and just take this jab step, I'm telling you right now, trust me when I say this, it's not going to be as explosive and it's not going to threaten the DB's leverage as much. So again, we take that prep step with the front foot and you got to push off of it, you guys. Like you're a pitcher in baseball. You have the rubber right here and you're pushing off the middle arch and pushing off of that rubber to sell to the outside. Now, why is this a lateral wide step? That has to do with the DB being close up and right up on the line of scrimmage. Guys, like if we take, so there's two types of wide step releases like this. There's more of a vertical wide step release and then there's a lateral wide step release. The vertical wide step would be like if the DB was like a yard away, because if he's a yard away, you got to close the distance with him. Reason why you have to close the distance is when you get to his toes like so, it makes it easier if I get him to jump outside to go hip to hip past him and get up into my route and do something called stack or get skinny, which essentially is just when that DB is trailing behind us or running right next to us, but he's tight to us, right? We have to get skinny and almost squeeze past him because that makes it easier to stack. That's why I have to close the space with the DB. So since he's right up on the line of scrimmage, he's already closed the space for me. So I got to make sure that that wide step is more of like a 90-degree lateral type move. I'm still stepping wide. I'm still pushing off the front foot. It's just I'm pushing at a different angle. I'm pushing here rather than pushing vertical. If he's a yard away, you could do the exact same type release, right? Remember, the two things that factor into a press release, his leverage and how close or how far he is. So if he's right up on the line, outside leverage, lateral wide step. If he's right up on the line, but a yard away, maybe it's more of a vertical wide step. So this is a textbook lateral wide step release right here. Great release you guys can use when a DB is outside shade press right up on the line. Now, before we get into the second release here, guys, with Justin Jefferson, if you are a wide receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, we are going to be coming out to 15 different states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So guys, check out that very first link in the description below. If we are coming to a state near you, we are going to be coming out to San Francisco, Orlando, Phoenix, Charlotte, Austin, Chicago, Seattle, Las Vegas, Newark, Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, if you're local to one of these cities or would like to travel out for a 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp, again, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season trainings. Let's get back to this video. So now this next release here from Justin Jefferson is going to be something called a split release. So a split release I love versus a DB who's in head-up press coverage. He could be right up on the line of scrimmage or maybe even have a yard of space. And let's talk about why this works. So Again, guys, when we come up to the line of scrimmage, we want to have a plan of action. But remember how I said you want to have a plan A and then you want to have a plan B. And in some cases, maybe even a plan C, right? Or it's like plan B, A, and plan B, B, if you will, like 1A, 1B. Again, you want to have a plan, but you got to be prepared to react if this DB changes up what he's going to do. So pre-snap, we come up to the line and we see a DB who's in head-up press. So he's got one of three options, right? He could either stay head-up press, cool, that's easy money, or he could shade to the inside, or he could shade to the outside, right? So when a DB is in head-up press, that's why I love something called a split release, because a split release is a very easy release to react off of the way a DB moves, I guess you could say. So a split release is exactly how it sounds. Let's talk about the technique, and then we'll talk about some more IQ stuff about it. So it's where your front foot in your stance goes out and your back foot goes straight up. A lot of people think that both feet go out. That's not the case, guys. You're going to end up being too wide. Your front foot is the only foot that goes out, and your back foot goes straight up. And when that happens, both feet make contact with the ground at the exact same time. They call that coming to balance. So this is why I like it versus head-up press, because I can react. So let's say, for example, this DB jumped to the inside when I did my split release. Because I'm balanced and because both feet are in the grass at the same time, I could just push off of this inside foot and take maybe the outside release. Now, Jefferson is running a drag, so a drag might be one where it's just like, hey, you got to go to the inside right now. And there's another reason why I like a split release in this sense, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let's say it was like a dig route where he could take an outside release or an inside release, and he does this split, and the DB just sits there. Okay, cool, let's take the inside release. That's the path of least resistance. Let's say he jumps to the inside. Okay, cool, I can push off this inside foot, go outside. Let's say he shades outside. All right, fine. Push off the outside foot and take what he gives me, guys. That's why the split release is so deadly versus head-up press, because you could react off of him. Now, since it's a drag route, he's kind of got to go to the inside. This is like mandatory inside release. You can't run a drag around a guy, especially when he has to get to a specific depth. So the split release is great because it's a way to freeze the DB and stop his feet, right? Like this split, you guys, like there's a split second where you hesitate when you come to balance. Your feet like essentially stop. You're not going like a foot fire. You're not closing the space of the DB. You are hesitating for a split second, and when both feet could hit the ground and you like freeze, then that DB also freezes, and then we could leave. He's going to match my tempo. He's going to match my speed. So if I could slow that speed for a second and get him to stop, then I'm going to be able to get separation. So let's play this again one more time from Justin Jefferson. This is a textbook split release to get that DB to stop his feet so he could win on that drag route. But remember, guys, we love it versus head-up press because we could always react. Now, this next release here, you guys, is going to be from Davante Adams. He's on like the 4-yard line, I would say, and he's running a slant route versus a DB who's lined up in like inside shade catch technique, right? So inside shade catch, so because like there are multiple types of man coverage that you have to understand as a receiver, right? Because remember, guys, we come up to the line of scrimmage, we want to have a plan, but we also want to be able to react off the DB. But our plan is developed by two things: DB's leverage and the distance. So press, I would say, is like right up in our face, maybe a yard away, maybe 2 yards away. Catch is around like maybe 3 yards to 4 yards off, but he's still in man coverage. The reason why he's playing this is, let's say Adams is running like a dig route. What he's hoping is that Adams doesn't work a release. He just kind of rushes it and tries to run around him so he could get hands on him and then reroute him. Or if he forces it to the inside, hands and reroute him inside. So that's why they'll play with that type of space. Now, this is very dangerous to play on the goal line, I would say, because DBs are taught not to backpedal on the goal line. So all Adams really has to do is close the space with him, and he could make a move because he knows this DB is not going to backpedal and maintain that space. So first and foremost, we have to close the space anytime I see this catch technique. That should be your thought process. And now that he's inside shade, we know he's trying to prevent the inside route, and he's got this type of space between me. So I got to make sure that Now, here's the thing. If we were running like a dig or a post, we would close the space, attack his leverage inside with the move, and then take the outside release, right? We're not going to be able to take an inside release when he's inside shade press because that's his goal. Or inside shade catch because that's his goal. Don't let us get to the inside. But since we have to run a slant, that's kind of a problem, right? Because I can't attack him and then restack and then run a slant because I don't have that type of time. I have to run this slant within 3 steps. So what he does is something called the diamond release. But there's a little extra like twist to this diamond release that I want to talk about that I feel all wide receivers can add to their game, especially against a disciplined DB. So let's watch what he does. So you see how he attacks him first, changes that tempo, then he does the diamond release, gets that DB to open up his hips, and then he's able to win on the slant. So let's talk about this, right? So everybody, I think, that's somewhat familiar with my page has maybe heard me talk about a diamond release before. And a diamond release is where you take 3 hard steps at a DB's outside shoulder and outside hip, and we attack at that 45. We want to try to make him think that we are running a fade, so he opens up, and then I slip back underneath him. And maybe you could use this hand right here to put it on the back of his shoulder and swat and slip under. They call it a throw-by move. Now, disciplined DBs, you guys, aren't always going to bite on that. Because how would you run let's say we're in the middle of the field, not the red zone. We'll talk about why this works in the red zone in a second, but let's say we're in the middle of the field, not in the red zone. How would you guys run a deep like go ball versus inside shade press? Would you just take off and run, or would you attack the DB's leverage first to try to move him inside and then go run the fade? I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's the second answer, right? You'd attack his leverage, then go to the outside, because our goal would be to get him to move inside so we could get some space to the outside. Now, DBs aren't idiots. They're not. If they see you come off the ball super fast and run to the outside, they know that's not how you run your fade. So they may be anticipating that you're going to try to slip back underneath and cut back underneath. So they may stay patient and they may not open up their hips. So you need to set up selling vertical with more than just running with long strides, running with full speed, running with a good body language that sells fade. You have to sell fade with the initial part of your release. So what does Adam do? He attacks him inside and he changes tempo a little bit. He goes 0, and then what does he do? Burst up to 100. And you see how many steps he takes on the 100. 3 steps. DB's thinking that it's a fade because of the tempo change at the start, and then bam, I got him. Now, in the goal line, that speed to the outside may not always sell it, because the DB isn't necessarily threatened by a deep fade when we're in the goal line. But what is he threatened by? He's threatened by that head top, like goal line jump ball fade. So watch what Adams does here. And this is, again, there's a lot going on right here with Adams that shows you how good of a route runner he is and how good he is off the line to have all these little details down, because route running is all about details. So you see how he attacks him inside. Then when he takes these 3 steps, look what his eyes do. I know it's kind of cuts off here. It's tough to see, but you could kind of see his head. Sorry about that at the top. But you see how he glances inside. They call that a peek back move, and that's just another way to get that DB to think fade, just because we are in the red zone and inside the 10. Because that's, again, Adams loves to run that little slot fade, especially when he was on the Packers with Rodgers throwing him the ball. So let's play this again, guys. So if you're running that slant route versus inside shade catch or press, make sure that you make it look like your fade route. Selling fade is a lot more than just running hard, running with long strides. It's also about the pre-release.